Joe and I misspent several years of our youth together at UW La Crosse. Joe has been present at the greatest sporting events of our lifetimes. He's interviewed the greatest sports figures and heroes of our lifetime, and he tells me he's also turned in the largest expense reports of any journalist in America. He's the pride of Seymour, Wisconsin, and of UW La Crosse. He's written an outstanding book called Silent Impact. If you go on his website, he's become a corporate speaker. It's an absolute privilege that he's here with us today at a less than corporate rate, let me just say that.
On the way home, I need some gas money.
Give him a warm Chippewa Valley welcome, Joe Schmit.
Thank you, and I should get it right out of the way. I didn't go to the University of Wisconsin La Crosse. I went to the University of Highlands La Crosse. Secondly, the first time I met Keith, I didn't like Keith. And that's how many of you out there? Now, as a matter of fact, Keith ended my athletic career. This is a very true story. He can admit it. I tried out for first base when I went to college at UW La Crosse, and I got beat out by Keith Tompkins 40 years ago. But I'm not bitter. He really wasn't that good. By the way, Keith, I love your leading with power, because you certainly didn't hit with power. Yeah. His bowling average and his batting average were both 175. Just so I kind of figure it out, you know, I'm a sportscaster in Minneapolis. How many of you have seen me on TV in Minneapolis? Okay, all right. For those of you who haven't seen me, you're looking at a living, breathing, broadcasting legend in Minnesota. Now, my ratings are so bad, I'm in the witness protection program. You know what? Here's another question I have. How many Packer fans do we have in here? Raise your hand. All right. How many Vikings fans do we have in here? All right. There might be a couple over leaking on this side of the river. I kind of got inspired that I decided on the drive over here, I wrote a poem in your honor today. Yeah. So, it goes like this. Being Christian men, there are obstacles and challenges that may not be to your liking. But it could be worse. You could be trying to win a Super Bowl as a Minnesota Viking. For the 8 people who raised their hands, they understand that pain very, very well. I am a sportscaster in Minnesota, and I got to admit, I've got like the best job in the world. I work 3 minutes a night. I get to go to games for free. When I'm at the game, I sit in the press box in the 50-yard line, and they feed me when I'm there. Sounds like a pretty good gig. But I'm going to tell you that when that game ends, that's when my job gets more difficult. Because at that point, I got to go into a dirty, stinky, smelly locker room and get half-naked men to say something intelligent. I'm talking to a baseball player, and his team has just qualified for the World Series. He's a veteran player, so I say to him, I said, what is this like? You are going to be playing in the World Series. You had to dream about this moment since you played T-ball. And he looks up at me and he says, Joe, I can sum up how I feel in 3 words. It don't get no better than this. We're out at the Minnesota Vikings in the middle of the season. A veteran player got cut. He was a starter, so we're out there with the cameras. We want to find out what happened. He was a guy that used to play for the Cowboys. They always get cut. You're a brave man wearing that shirt here, aren't you? So we're out at the Vikings, and this veteran player got cut, so we're out in the parking lot trying to figure out what happened. So he comes walking out of the facility, and we got the cameras rolling, and we say, what happened? What happened? How come the Vikings cut you? And he looks back at the camera and he says, no compliment, no compliment. comment would have been nice. Last but not least, this is my favorite, and this is where you'll understand my pain. Talking to a college freshman, the very first time he touched the ball in a football game, he goes 100 yards for a touchdown. It happened on a kickoff return. So afterwards we interview him, and this kid, his heart's a pumping, his corpuscles are pumping, his eyes are as big as saucers, and we say, describe the play. He says, it was great. I got the ball at the goal line. I ran up to the 20-yard line. I saw a big hole up the outside. That's when my instincts kicked in. It was like running from the cops. Now you're feeling my pain. Well, the truth is, like that football player, each and every one of us operates by our instincts. And those instincts lead to actions. And those actions either have a positive impact on the world around us, or they have a negative impact on the world around us. The problem is, sometimes in this busy, crazy, hectic world, we sleepwalk through the mundane to the monumental moments of our lives, not realizing that everything we do, everything we say, how we act, how we react, what our attitude is, what our body language is, it all leaves a mark. It all has an impact. And what we all need to do is to wake up and realize that we make our biggest impressions when we're not trying to be impressive. Let me say that again. We make our biggest impressions when we are not trying to be impressive. I call this concept silent impact. That's what I've done my research on. That's what my stories are on. That's what I've written my book on. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Now let me start you off with a question. I see we got some people in here that are probably going back to work after lunch. When you get back to work today, or a group or organization you belong to, think about this for a second. If there were a going away party tonight, who would the most people show up for? Think about that for a second, because that person is having a tremendous impact on that business or that group or that organization. That person has a lot to say about the culture of that group or organization. That person's goal. We did research on companies small, medium, and large as Target Corporation itself, looking for this person to find out what they had and what made them so special. And we didn't always find this influential person in the usual places. It wasn't always the person who sat in the corner office. Sometimes this person who had the biggest impact was the person who cleaned the corner office. But in each and every case, this person had three traits in common: purpose, persistence, and passion. Purpose. They align their actions with their values all the time. Persistence. They were persistent in their positivity, they were persistent in their preparation, and they were the kind of people who would go above and beyond the call of duty, no questions asked. And last but not least, this person who had this tremendous impact was a person of tremendous passion. They were the heart and soul of the operation because they simply cared about you. They not only cared about you as a coworker, as a professional, they cared about you as a human being too. They wanted to be there to celebrate your successes, and they wanted to be there to support you when things didn't go well. You put them all together, purpose, persistence, and passion, and you get what I call an impact player. Now, when I cover sports on my highly rated sports shows on Channel 5 in the Twin Cities, the people who saw me have laughed. When I talk about an impact player, what does an impact player do? They make everybody on the field to play better just by them being there. I watch Aaron Rodgers play football, right? Aaron Rodgers is an impact player. Zach Parise play hockey for the Minnesota Wild. Every time he's on the ice, everybody is better just by him being there. Well, you can become an impact player too in life, in your business, your personal, professional life, when you become more aware and more intentional with the silent impact that you're having on other people. When you really realize that we do make our biggest impressions when we're not trying to be impressive. I want to talk about an impact player who I think most of you in this room will know. He's an impact player both on the field and off the field. Joe Mauer of the Minnesota Twins. 6-time All-Star, 2-time American League batting champion, 1-time most valuable player. 14 years ago, Joe was a senior at Cretin-Durham Hall High School in St. Paul, Minnesota. Now, in every high school, there's a lunchroom. And in every lunchroom, there's a cool table. Wherever Joe Mauer sat every day at Cretin-Durham Hall was the cool table. He was the big man on campus. He was recruited by every major college football program to be their starting quarterback. He was an all-state guard in basketball. He led his team to state championship in basketball. But baseball was his best sport. The Twins made him the very first pick in the amateur baseball draft. Joe was the big man on campus. He was tall, good-looking, and soon to be very rich. I'd take any one of those three for 10 minutes. Every day after Joe's 4th hour class, Joe would walk a special needs student who happened to be blind to the lunchroom and invite him to sit down at his table. Every day. So I went to Joe a couple of years ago when I was writing the book and researching this story. I said, Joe, why did you do that? And Joe's response was this simple. He said, because it was the right thing to do. I think you could say it was Joe's purpose. He was aligning his actions with his values, and because of that, it had tremendous impact. So I started thinking, who did this all have impact on? So I put my reporter's cap on and I got on the horn. I found Mike Hawley, the young student who Joe walked to class every day. And I said, Mike, what was this like to have Joe, the coolest man in school, invite you to his table? He said it was great. He was a senior and he said he had never had a friend who was an athlete before. Now we sat at that athlete's table every day and they talked sports. And if somebody wanted to know how many points Kevin Garnett scored, they'd ask Mike because he was a walking sports encyclopedia. So then I started thinking, we make our biggest impressions when we're not trying to be impressive. So I found 6 guys who sat around that table every day at Cretin-Durham Hall. And then they started telling me the stories. They said that Joe would walk Mike to his next class when lunch ended. By the end of the first semester, these guys who sat at that table would fight over who got to walk Mike to his next class. Wednesdays was pizza day at Cretin-Durham Hall. And Mike would invariably spill some crumbs on his clothing, some pizza sauce on his chin or his cheek. Joe would nonchalantly grab a napkin, wipe him off, brush him off, and get him ready for the next class. By the end of the first semester, they were all doing this. These are high school kids, the most selfish creatures on God's green earth. But Joe was having an impact. And the impact he was having is real, it's powerful, it's profound, it's contagious, and it can last a long, long time. There was a teacher who monitored that classroom every day who was so inspired he wrote a poem, and the poem was called Lunch with Mike. And in the poem it said, Joe, for the rest of your career, people will judge you by what you do with a bat and a ball. But they don't know you. I know you by what I saw you do every day at Cretin-Durham Hall. You never know when you're going to be that person to have the impact. When you start looking at impact, you start looking at the influence you have on others, you're going to start seeing it in every single phase of your life. That impact can be positive like Joe Mauer, or it can be negative too. You take your 13-year-old son to the amusement park, and you look up at the prices, and you see that 12 and under is $25, and 13 and above is $50. You lean over to your 13-year-old son, and you say, you're 12 today. Now, we probably have all done that in some form or fashion. I'm guilty of that myself. But for $25, you just sold out on integrity. For $25, your silent impact was negative. You just told your kid to never have their phone on when somebody's speaking. I'm sorry, it was there. You just told your kid that there are rules or regulations that you don't like. You can simply ignore them. You see, your silent impact can be negative too. We got to be also careful. Sometimes the impact you have on somebody else or the impact that somebody has on you, you won't realize for many, many years. I spent the formative years of my life growing up in a bar. My friends say that explains a lot of things. This bar was located in Seymour, Wisconsin. How many of you guys know where Seymour is? Yeah, a few people got lost. My high school in Seymour, my high school was so small that we had driver's education and sex education in the very same car. Some of you guys are laughing a little too hard on that one. This bar was not open 24/7, 365, but it was open early in the morning because when the farmers got done doing their chores, we're a farming community, the farmers would come in for a shot of whiskey and a beer, and they wanted to find out what in the world was happening from the guy behind the bar, Schmit, my dad. Guy who was small in stature and big in personality. He kind of looked like a little Danny DeVito behind the bar. My dad had a wonderful gift, and this was his gift. He made everybody feel like they were his best friend. Isn't that a great gift? We all have gifts. Figure out what your gifts are and make sure you use them. Make sure you use them. We all have God-given gifts. Make sure we use them. Well, the truth is, my dad really only had one best friend, and his name was Mr. Leash. Now, Mr. Leash would come to the bar quite often because he ran the local pop distribution company, so he'd bring product into the bar, and I can remember when Mr. Leash would come in, they were almost like they were brothers. My dad, they would be laughing and joking and having a really good time. This bar was also one of 3 places in town that had the fire phone for the volunteer fire and rescue unit. So whenever that phone rang, we knew something was up. And one day, I was in the bar with my dad, because I like to spend time with my dad, and the fire phone rang. And right away, I knew something was different. I could see fear in my dad's eyes. He picked up the phone, called out for my mom, and he left. And I found out later that Mr. Leash had been killed in a car accident. I don't remember a lot about what happened after that. But Mr. Leash had a son whose name was Donnie. Now, I was 9 years old at the time, and Donnie was 8. Before I knew it, Donnie was coming with us to every family event. We have a family picnic, we go to a basketball game, a hockey game, didn't matter. My dad was always inviting Donnie along. We had 6 kids in the family, and Donnie made 7. We were good Catholics, and back then in the Catholic religion, you had rhythm and you had bingo. And if you didn't have rhythm, bingo. So Dad would invite Donnie to every single event, and I would remember going to my brothers and sisters, why does Donnie always have to come along? Why does Donnie always have to come along? I didn't understand what my dad was doing. As I went through high school and went off to school lacrosse, I had kind of lost track of Donnie. I hadn't seen Donnie in several years. The next time I saw Donnie, I was 25 years old, and Donnie was crying. It was at my dad's funeral. And I don't remember a lot about that time. I remember seeing him cry at that funeral. And a couple years later, I heard a quote from Maya Angelou that took me right back to that moment. And the quote is, people won't remember what you said, people won't remember what you did, but people will remember how you made them feel. My dad made Donnie feel good. My dad made Donnie feel good. You see, my dad's job as a best friend did not end when Mr. Leash died. Oh no, Mr. Leash now needed my dad more than ever. You could say my dad had a new purpose. He was aligning his actions with his values, and because of that, it had tremendous impact. I didn't realize the impact it had on me until many years later. About a year before my father passed away, I'd become involved in the Big Brothers, Little Brothers program. I was matched with a little kid at risk, and we had a great relationship. I wasn't even sure why I became a Big Brother. And as I got more involved in the organization and got to the Twin Cities, I started a charity golf tournament for Big Brothers and Big Sisters. It ran for 16 years, and with the help of a lot of sponsors and volunteers, we raised a lot of money and awareness for this great organization. And about halfway through the run of the tournament, Bob Mitchell, the executive director of Big Brothers, he said to me, he goes, you know, Joe, through the years, your family has all come up to support you in your tournament. And I met your mom, and I met your brothers, and I met your sisters. Tell me about your dad. And I said, oh, Bob, you love my dad. You love my dad. And as I started talking about my dad, it hit me like a ton of bricks. My dad had been a big brother to Donnie. He didn't have an organization around him, but he was just doing the right thing, and he gave me an example. I paid it forward without even realizing why I paid it forward. I did it because of the impact that my dad had on me. The impact we have on other people is real. It's powerful, it's profound. We all need to be more aware and more intentional with that impact that we have. You see, by the time I'm done here, I think you will understand the moral of the story. And I'm reminded when I was in school, the teacher wanted to know an example of the moral of the story. So a kid raises his hand back in the room and he says, you know, when my dad was a kid, he used to collect pop bottles and he got a penny a bottle. And today he owns that top factory. The teacher says, well, that's great. What's the moral of the story? Kid says, a penny saved is a penny earned. Next kid raises his hand. He says, my little brother was coming home from the grocery store. He had a basket full of eggs. He tripped and he fell and he broke some of the eggs. And the teacher said, well, what's the moral of the story? You might have guessed. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Third kid raises his hand. He says, my Uncle Harry was in WW2. He was down in a foxhole all by himself. He looked up 100 Germans coming over the hill, armed and dangerous. Uncle Harry got back down into that foxhole, grabbed a bottle of Jack Daniels, chucked that sucker down, got up and captured all 100 Germans. The teacher goes, well, that's absolutely incredible. What's the moral of the story? Kid says, don't mess with Uncle Harry when he's been drinking. So purpose. Align your actions with your values. You know, when Keith was talking earlier, I just thought, boy, this is right in the pocket of what we're talking about. You can't do it 90% of the time. You got to do it 100% of the time. And if you don't, we hear about you. Maria Sharapova, General Petraeus, Lance Armstrong. People who don't live their truth and people who don't live their purpose. Persistence. You need to be persistent with your positivity and you need to be persistent with your preparation. Back when I was going to college at UW La Crosse with Keith, I had to be the most persistent I had ever been in my entire life. You see, I had a problem, guys. Every time I brought a girl home, I had a problem. My mom didn't like her. So finally I got smart. I went out and I kind of found a girlfriend that looked like my mom. She dressed like my mom. I know this sounds kind of funky. She wore the same perfume as my mom. I took her home and it was fantastic. But now I had a new problem. My dad couldn't stand her. So I needed to be persistent. I'm going to start persistence with a U.S. history lesson. The Declaration of Independence is one of the greatest documents ever written, and in that document we are guaranteed certain inalienable rights: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, we're all doing pretty good at life today. We're all on the right side of the ground. We do great at liberty. Even though we got the craziest presidential election going on in the world, we do great at liberty. And last but not least, sometimes where we fail is our pursuit of happiness. Happiness is a choice. If you want to be happy, you need to be persistent in your positivity. Think about people you like to be around in your life. They're positive people. They give you energy. Negative people take it away. I think the best way to stay persistent in your positivity is try to get rid of as many negative things as you can in your life. Get rid of negative thoughts. How do you fight off negative thoughts? We all have them. I'll give you my little tip that I normally don't use in a speech, but for this group I will. When I get a negative thought and I'm going negative, I'm going dark, I say, help me, Jesus. Help me, Jesus. Kind of helps me get rid of it a little bit. Get rid of negative words. Listen to the words you speak to your coworkers, to your people, to your family. Get rid of negative words. Last but not least, get rid of negative friends. My wife and I were out to dinner several years ago with this couple we hadn't seen in a while. We had a lot of mutual friends. And about halfway through the dinner, I realized this was a pretty negative experience. They were talking trash about our mutual friends. They were complaining about the food and the service. They were bragging about their kids, and everybody knows my kids are better than their kids. But it was a real negative experience. And I remember driving back from the restaurant, and I said to Laura, I said, we're not going out with them again. And she said, why is that? I said, we only have so many nights a year we can choose who we socialize with. We will not pick negative. And we haven't gone out with them since. Now let's be honest in this room, full of Christian men, so you can't lie. Let's be honest, in the last year, out of some sense of social obligation, how many of you maybe spent some time socially with someone you really didn't want? You can raise your hand, not have to raise real high, just raise a little bit. Yeah, quite a few of you. If they're sitting next to you, don't look at them right now. But you need to be persistent in your positivity and figure out triggers that keep you positive when everything in the world is going on around you negative. You also need to be persistent with your preparation. Persistent with your preparation. Several years ago, I was down in the University of Minnesota Mankato. That's where the Minnesota Vikings trained. And this was the year that Denny Green had just been named the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings. And I got a show on Sunday nights at 10:35 called Sports Rep, a half-hour show. I had worked the angles, and I had lined up the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings on the opening night of training camp to be my guest the entire show. Denny Green was going to sit down with me for a half hour. It was actually the year that I almost quit broadcasting because I thought I was going to become a millionaire. Yeah, you see, I had invented the Randy Moss doll and had the exclusive rights to it. It was perfect. It's sort of about this tall. It looked absolutely like him, and you would wind it up, and it would quit. I just discovered something. That joke works better with a Packer audience than a Viking audience. So I've got the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings lined up for an entire half hour. It's a nice coup. Well, we're going to do the show. We decided to do the show at the football stadium down there at the campus. It's the Division II football campus, so we had the lights on in the stadium. We had 3 cameras, beautiful stadium in the background of the set. And all of a sudden, about 5 minutes before we go on the air, a high school kid who's working that summer as a ball boy for the Vikings decides to come and work out in the stadium. He's going to run up and down the stairs. You know, this is a kid who got hired to pick up jocks and socks and footballs all summer, and all of a sudden he decides to work out when he sees the television cameras. I thought to myself, I know exactly what that kid did. He called his buddies and he said, hey, watch Channel 5 tonight. Because whenever there's a shot at Denny Green, you're going to see me running up and down the stairs. And sure enough, every time we had a shot at Denny Green, there's that kid. I thought, well, you little. So the show wraps up a half hour later, and the kid, Denny Green, goes back to the dorm, and guess what? The kid was done working out too. Now the next night, we were still down at Vikings training camp. I'm doing my 10 o'clock news tonight at the Vikings dormitory, in front of the Vikings dormitory. It was the old Gage Hall. The dormitory was right here. The football field that I had done the live shot with Denny Green at the night before was right here. The cheap hotel that Channel 5 put me up in was right here. So I got done doing my broadcast at about 10:35 and helped the guys wrap up their cables and put their cameras away, and I started walking towards the hotel. And as I got to the football field, there are no lights on the stadium. There are no TV cameras there, and there's not a head coach of an NFL team anywhere to be seen. And all of a sudden I hear, I go and I look, and on the moonlit night, there's that kid, the same kid, running and working out just as hard as he had the night before. I had it all wrong. Now, some of you may know who this kid is. His name is Larry Fitzgerald Jr. of the Arizona Cardinals, a future Hall of Fame wide receiver. Good enough isn't good enough if you want to be the best. And if you want to be the best, you've got to prepare to be the best. And it's not just preparing for the good, you got to prepare for the bad and prepare for the ugly. I am sure any business that you are in, the more success you have, that means that you've been better prepared than your competition. I was in Kansas City the night that Paul Molitor became the 21st player in Major League Baseball history to get his 3,000th hit. And as a side note, just a quick side note here on Paul Molitor, who's now the manager of the Twins. Keith, when I agreed to come and speak here, sent me the 40 Days book, which is a great book. And I was in Paul Molitor's office last season getting ready to interview him, and he had his briefcase open, and he had the 40 Days book. And I said to Paul, I said, good book, huh? He goes, yeah, a lot of good stuff in there. So now you know what kind of character this guy is. So Paul Molitor, I'm there the night that Paul Molitor becomes the 21st guy to get his 3,000th hit. Big, monumental thing. The next night we get to the ballpark in Kansas City. We had some satellite truck problems, so we got there early to make sure we wouldn't have any technical problems the next night on the air. But who shows up to the ballpark early but Paul Molitor? And I say, Molly, what are you doing here so early? He goes, oh, I'm here for early batting practice. I don't like the way I'm swinging the bat right now. Early batting practice is for the subs, the scrubs, the rookies who are trying to make it. Here's a guy who had a major league milestone the night before. He's on the cover of the USA Today, back the next day, grinding and working just as hard. Is there any doubt in your mind that we got those first 3,000 hits? And you want to talk about a silent impact? What kind of impact do you think that made on those subs and those scrubs and those rookies trying to make it? To see this guy back the next day grinding and working just as hard. You never know when you're going to be that person to make that impact. You know, life is going to give you lemons, right? And what did Mom say when life gives you lemons? Make a lemonade. I say periodically you need to add a shot of vodka. So be persistent in your positivity. Figure what triggers you to stay positive when everything around you is negative. And if you want to win, be persistent in your preparation. Last but not least, passion. Passion. Think about people you like to be around. I guarantee they're passionate people. I married my wife because she's the most passionate person I know. Just the other night I came home from work and she's sitting with a glass of wine and she says, I love you. I don't know how I would have made it all these years without you. I said, well, honey, I love you too, but are you sure that's not the wine talking? She said, yes, I'm sure. I was talking to the wine. Once I figured out I wasn't good enough to play pro sports, and it actually was probably before Keith beat me out for first base, because in Little League, I made Little League history. I was the first player to ever be traded. And my dad was my coach. But once I figured out that I wasn't going to make it as an athlete, I wanted to be a TV sportscaster. I thought it'd be the coolest job in the world, and it is. And I pinched myself because I've been lucky enough in my career to have one-on-one interviews with the greatest athletes of our lifetime. I've had one-on-one conversations with Muhammad Ali, Tiger Woods, Jack Nicklaus, LeBron James, Michael Jordan, Brett Favre, Bart Starr, on and on and on. And I tried to figure out, what do all these great athletes who take their game to the next level, what do they have that nobody else has? Well, they all have amazing God-given ability. They're all rich. In Tiger's case, he's never lonely. But what they all had, and this is what I figured out, was not only the passion to be the best, but the passion to prepare to be the best. They wanted to compete against the best because they knew that would make them better. They didn't want to compete against somebody they knew they could beat. They thought the only way for them to get better was to compete against the best. I covered a boxer in Minnesota by the name of Scott Ledoux. Any of you guys remember Scott Ledoux? Yeah. Scott Ledoux stepped in the ring with 8 heavyweight world champions, and he lost all 8 fights. They called Scott the Great White Hope. And I said, Scott, does that work for you? And he said, yep, I'm white and I'm hoping. Scott's best fight was against George Foreman. Now this was George Foreman before he invented the George Foreman grill and ate a whole bunch of double cheeseburgers off of that grill. George was a lean, mean fighting machine. And for 8 rounds, Scott Ledoux went toe-to-toe with this human wrecking machine. But in the 8th round, Foreman was able to poke Ledoux in the eye with his thumb. Scott's eyes swelled shut. He couldn't see anymore. The referee had to stop the fight. Later in the locker room, Scott lost it by a technical knockout. Later in the locker room, a doctor is looking at Scott. And he says, Scott, I'm really afraid you're going to lose your eye. And Scott looks up at the doctor with one eye and he said, what's an eye when you've given your heart? What's an eye when you've given your heart? That's passion. I hope you have that kind of passion for your relationships, for your family, for your job, for your career. Because passion wins and passion has impact. As I was doing research and gathering stories for this silent impact movement I'm trying, it's not quite as big as the power deal here, but we'll work on it. But a friend of mine, I had lunch with Sam Rickard, and Sam calls me up 2 days after lunch and he goes, you know, I really understand your silent impact. Can I share a story with you? And I said, absolutely. So he said, he recently got an email from a girl he went to high school with 25 years ago. And the email went like this. Hi Sam, this is Kristen. You probably don't remember me, but I certainly remember you. 25 years ago, you were a senior and a star of the high school football team. I was an insecure, unpopular freshman. And one day, I was getting bullied by my locker. Not just by any bully, but by a kid who had bullied me before, and he struck fear into my heart. Many people walked by, including teachers. You saw what was happening, and you came and told the kid to knock it off. And if he didn't knock it off, he was going to have to deal with you. And you grabbed my hand and told me, if he ever comes back, you let me know because I won't let him do that. I want to let you know something, Sam. You saved my life that day. I was in so much pain I was going to go home and swallow a bottle of sleeping pills, hoping to never wake up. I just needed to thank you for saving my life. It's called the second thank you. When you go back and thank somebody who's at a monumental moment in your life, change the arc of your career, change the arc of your life, maybe change you who you are as a person, change you who you are as a man. If that person is in your life, go back and thank them. And if they're not in your life, find a son or a daughter and let them know. My dad died 33 years ago, March 8th. And there were some tributes on Facebook to my dad that were just amazing to me. It made my day. It made my year. As I keep talking and getting stories back on Silent Impact, I realized one other thing. It changed my life. It changed my life. And quite frankly, once again, I'll tell this group, I normally don't do this in audiences. The name of the book, the name of my speech could be, What Would Jesus Do? But somebody already took that. But it really is. But I realized that if I was going to go out and talk this, I had to live my truth. I had to live a life of impact too. This summer I was driving back to Seymour for my class reunion. We have them every 5 years. I think it was my 20th. I was never good at math. All the way back to the reunion, I kept thinking of one person, Virginia. And I thought, I've never seen Virginia at a reunion, but if she's there, I knew what I needed to do. I walked into the reunion and one of the first people I saw was Virginia. So I knew I needed to do something. I got up enough courage and later in the evening I asked her if I could talk to her. You see, I wasn't nice to Virginia. I was one of the guys, there were a lot of people who weren't nice to Virginia. They thought it was funny to pick on Virginia because she was different. And for 40 years I thought about it. We talked, I found out what was going on in her life. I apologized to her and she accepted my apology. We both cried a little bit. It was a great moment, but it wasn't the best moment. During our conversation, Virginia had told me she had never been to a class reunion in the 40 years. She had never been back. She had turned around 3 times on her way to the reunion this year. And then finally she said she wanted to gather enough strength to go. As the night ended, Virginia sought me out and gave me a hug. She thanked me again and she said, I'll see you in 5 years. That was the great moment. That was the great moment. So you got to live your truth. I heard about a nun from northern Minnesota who is, I gotta make sure the time's okay. I'm looking at that clock and all of a sudden I realize I can't see it. I'm going, I might be up here for 2 hours. I heard about a nun from northern Minnesota who was a prime example of silent impact. So I put my reporter's cap back on because I knew I had to find her. Unfortunately, I found her obituary in the Brainerd Dispatch. It said that Sister Helen Marosla was born in 1935. She had become a nun. She taught in Catholic schools in Minnesota, Kentucky, and Texas. She died in the year 2000 and she lived a life of servitude. But, but what it didn't talk about was the impact she had on her world back then and the impact she's still having on the world today. Sister was teaching 3rd grade in a Catholic school in northern Minnesota, Little Falls, Minnesota. When into her classroom walks a young guy by the name of Mark Eklund. Now Mark's a good kid, but he's a little bit of a troublemaker. He talked way too much. At one time, Sister put Scotch tape over his mouth to get him to shut up. That didn't work. They both laughed about it. Fast forward a couple of years, Sister's now teaching high school math. And into her classroom walks Mark Eklund, a little taller, a little more handsome, still a little bit of a troublemaker, but they had a good relationship. Well, one week, Sister was trying to teach this class a new math concept, and nobody was getting it. Sister knew that the atmosphere and the culture in the classroom was wrong. She knew she needed to change it. So she told everybody to take out a sheet of paper, and the kids thought, oh no, pop quiz. She goes, no, here's what I want you to do. I want you to spend the rest of the hour writing down the nicest thing you can say about each of your fellow classmates. You've gone to school with them all year through your Catholic school system. So on the left-hand column, write down everybody's name. And then write the nicest thing you can say about each and every one of the students. Well, they got right to it. And when the bell rang, everybody handed in their papers. And over the weekend, Sister compiled a list for everybody. And on Monday, she handed out the list. And right away, she saw smiles and she saw laughter. She started teaching this math concept that nobody understood. All of a sudden, now it was understood by all because the kids were engaged. She had changed it in that classroom. She brought success. A couple years later, Sister is returning from vacation, and she lands at the Minneapolis St. Paul airport, and her parents pick her up. And as they're driving up north, her dad says, "Honey, I got a call from the Eklunds." And Sister said, "Oh, how is Mark? I've been thinking about him so much lately." And Dad says, "Honey, I'm sorry to tell you, Mark died in the Vietnam War. His funeral is tomorrow, and the family has called and asked if you could come." Well, Sister was very sad, and obviously she went to Mark Eklund's funeral. And Mark was given the full treatment an American hero should get. His flag was draped with red, white, and blue. He got a 21-gun salute at his gravesite. And it was at his gravesite a young soldier approached Sister and said, "Were you Mark's math teacher?" She said, "Yes, I was." He said, "I served with Mark in Vietnam. He talked about you a lot." Sister was stunned. Later, the family had invited everybody out to the family farm for lunch to finish the celebration of Mark Eklund's life. And it was at this lunch where Sister Helen was approached by Mark's parents. They said the Army had sent back Mark's belongings and they wanted to show her something. Out of a plastic bag, they pulled out a wallet. Out of the wallet, they pulled out a crinkled, tattered piece of paper with yellowed Scotch tape on it. It was the list. Mark had carried the list with him to his dying day. Soon, some of Mark's classmates had gathered around. One said, "I still have my list. It's in my wedding album." Another one said, "I have my list. It's in my sock drawer." A third one, a gentleman, opened up his wallet and pulled out a tattered, crinkled piece of paper. They all had their list. Sister wrote an article for a religious education magazine trying to inspire young teachers to try things different, be innovative, show your passion for teaching. And anyway, as things go now, this story went viral. It was in Reader's Digest, it was in Chicken Soup for the Soul, and Sister got a lot of attention, and she did not like the attention. But before she died, she gave one last interview. And she was asked, what was the message that you wanted to give the kids with the list? And she said, the message is very simple. We can always find something nice to say about everybody. And each and every one of us needs to praise more, condemn less. Praise more, condemn less. The power of Sister Helen's message is still being heard today. I know that for a fact because I found 6 of Mark Eklund's classmates. All 6 said if they had to name the most influential person in their life, Sister Helen would be one of those most influential people. All 6 said that they still have the list or they remember everything on the list. All 6 said they taught the lessons that Sister Helen taught them onto their kids and now onto their grandkids. Vicki McNally said on her list, she was funny, she was smart, she had nice long legs. Judy Swanson said on her list, she was loyal, she was good at art, she had luscious lips. So we know the hormones were raging for at least one of the kids in Sister Helen's class. Chuck Lesmeister was Mark Eklund's best friend. I said to Chuck, why do you think Mark brought the list with him to Vietnam? He said, you know what, I don't know for sure. But he said, Mark came from a big family. He was the kind of guy that not a lot of people just recognized or kind of fit in like by the wall. And maybe he just took it there whenever he needed to feel good about himself. Jim Halby was not at Mark Eklund's funeral. Jim Halby was serving in the war in Vietnam himself, half a world away. In his wallet was the list. I said to Jim, why did you bring that list with you to Vietnam? He said, I was packing the night before I went. And he goes, I was scared to death. And he said, I saw the list was in my dresser and I thought, I'll put it in my wallet. Maybe if there's a bad day, this will help me get through a bad day. He said, I had a lot of bad days in Vietnam. Sister Helen, the impact that she had back then is still being felt today. and probably will be felt for generations. You see what I think we all need to do, and here's your assignment when you go home tonight. What we all need to do is to build our own Mount Rushmore of influence. If you had to name the 4 most influential people in your life, who would they be and who would you put up there? Who deserves to be up there? Would it be because they're people of purpose, persistence, and passion? Probably. Roy Griant, the longtime track coach at the University of Minnesota, recently passed away. And I interviewed Roy a couple of times, didn't really get to know him very well, and I kind of feel bad about that now. Roy coached Big Ten champs, national champs, Olympic champs. He coached for over 30 years at the University of Minnesota. I started reading the tributes on Facebook on his Caring Bridge site. And some of these Olympians and these champions were writing tributes. They didn't write about the big meet or the big win. They talked about the impact he had. Roy, thank you for making me a better parent. Roy, I just finished a big business deal, and I used Roy Griant 101 on the guy. It worked perfectly. Roy, thank you for helping me be a better person. See, when it's all said and done, when we all leave this earth, you want people talking about the awards you won? Do you want people talking about how much money you have? Or do you want them talking about the impact you had, the real impact you've had? That's what we want them to talk about, isn't it? You see, all the research I've done, all the stories I've done, I've figured out a couple things about influence and the impact that we have. It starts with influence and then it ends with impact. First of all, you need to care. When you care, you connect. Secondly, influence is not a soft skill. And it's also the intersection of 2 very human traits. We all want to be liked, and we all want to be leave a legacy. So why wouldn't we spend more time being more aware and more intentional with the impact that we have on each other? And here's the final secret. The final secret to the entire thing of silent impact. I figured it out. It's so simple, it's hard to believe. And it definitely fits into what would Jesus do category. It's not about them liking you. It's not about that at all. It's about them liking themselves. And if you can be the person to help make that happen, if you can make that magic happen, guess what? Someday you'll be on their Mount Rushmore of influence yourself. And when that magical moment happens, there'll be 3 words to sum up how you feel. It don't get no better than this. Thank you so much.